what is the relationship between INFJs and morality and ethics? And even more specifically, is it true that INFJs are often characterized by what could be best described as moral rigidity? So a moral inflexibility, moral rigidity, a certain, in more intense or extreme cases, you could even talk of a moral absolutism. These are all things that are observable in some INFJs. Not all INFJs are moral absolutists, but the vast majority of INFJs, perhaps all of them, tend to be, knowingly or not, moral universalists and more rigid than maybe they either let on or admit to themselves. And some INFJs will admit to be certainly kind of rigid in terms of their moral stances and principles. It's all the easier to admit that it's not necessarily a stigma, socially speaking, to admit to that kind of rigidity. You know, some kinds of rigidity might not be very socially valued, but to say that you're inflexible morally carries a certain sense of dignity and a certain sense of staunch adherence to principles, and that tends to be seen as a virtue, as probity, you know. So that's the kind of rigidity that someone who has that will admit or confess to having more easily than having other rigidities. I don't know, you know, you can intellectual rigidities, sexual rigidities, aesthetic rigidities, or what have you. For all these reasons, throughout my short career as an investigator of the Jungian types and primarily the NI-dominant types and INFJ types, I have culled quite significant evidence that yes, INFJs tend to have a certain moral rigidity to them. But it's not necessarily always been easy to explain. You can have superficial explanations. So a typical superficial explanation of why INFJs tend to be morally rigid is that, first of all, FE is a universalizing function. FE is an impersonal function. It doesn't inject much subjectivity into its expression and its functioning. So it has to be based on principles, like, again, impersonal principles. And it would not make a lot of sense for these principles to constantly shift, okay? Well, now you can also combine that with what is often described as the NI tunnel vision, in such a way that maybe for an NI-FE person, like an INFJ, some of the inflexibility of the NI tunneling is rubbing off on the universalizing of FE in such a way that you get this sense of moral rigidity. Core principles that don't change very much. Now that I think about it, this might not be such a superficial interpretation after all. I'd say that there's a lot of people who would consider that explanation already kind of satisfying. So we may consider that part of the story, you know. Impersonal principles combined with the inflexibility of the NI vision as rubbing off on the FEUs as an auxiliary function, is always going to be subjected to the influence of the NI dominance. Okay, so that's one aspect. At the same time, we may notice that FE dominance, ESFJs, ENFJs, seem, on the average, a little bit less inflexible, a little bit less rigid morally. So how do we square that with the fact that they are FE dominants? Well, you might say, okay, at least ESFJs don't have the NI tunnel vision, so they don't have that kind of inflexibility. ENFJs have NI as an auxiliary function, but still there's an interaction there between FE impersonal nature and NI that ought to kind of symmetrically mirror what we see in INFJs, and it doesn't seem to be as strong. It seems that moral rigidity is really something that is most exemplified in INFJs. And that's why I think that we need to complete the initial explanation with another part of the explanation, And this goes a little bit deeper, I think, and is part of my own thinking, and it's certainly going to cause some, well, it's going to provoke thoughts, I hope, and it maybe cause a bit of controversy, but we're exploring, we're investigating, so let's see where that goes. Well, remember that in recent videos, I have been talking about the fact that an INFJ's stable access to external reality and trust in external reality very much depends on their inner subjective engagements with external reality. Namely, they depend on other people to maintain their sense of being anchored in that external reality. It's not, as some people have misread me, that without other people, they lose a sense that there is an external world, and that's not the case. But they have more trust in the external world, and they're more comfortable in navigating the external world instead of escaping from it to find, again, a sense of refuge in the NI world and solipsism. They gain trust through gaining the confirmation that people in external reality deserve to be trusted, and show thereby that there is such a thing as a trustworthy external world beyond NI, okay? That's something that I just said I've been exploring more in recent videos, but I started grappling with this issue in my very first book on the INFJ, the Ecstatic Soul. INFJ Life, or no, a new look at the INFJ personality, my first book. I recommend you get it if you want to know more about the INFJ mental makeup, how INFJs think, what is their consciousness like, what's it like to be an INFJ and think like an INFJ. That's the deepest investigation you'll find online, and the link is right below. It's less than $10, so it's check the reviews as well, if that might whet your appetite even further. But so this notion that INFJ alienation is really pronounced because it is FE that is our main conduit to external reality, and FE is essentially social. FE is essentially intersubjective. Now, when an INFJ's trust is broken, of course, that is going to not just make them feel disillusioned with said friendship, or make them very disappointed and sad and bitter and all that, which would be legitimate feelings as well. It's going to cause at some level an existential angst, precisely because FE is the point of anchor with external reality in terms of having a trusting relationship with that external reality. And all INFJs at some point or other are going to be experiencing this kind of betrayal, this kind of disappointment, because people are not perfect and they do betray you, they do break your trust. In that context, having a fairly rigid set of moral principles, which are all about FE engagement with external reality for INFJs, is a way of codifying FE. It's a way of setting clear rules and boundaries to FE. It's reassuring to INFJs. It's the building of a safeguard against the possibility of trust being broken, to bring in a higher sense of security, a higher sense of like a tougher filter on who may or may be not trusted or engaged with in such a way that one's vulnerabilities may be shared with that person. So in a sense, the more you adhere to a fixed notion of moral principles, you are bringing in more regulations to FE intersubjectivity. And in that way, you're protecting yourself more against the possibility of your trust being broken, which in turn would lead to the existential angst that might lead then to NI retreat and veering away from the path of spiritualization. And that's how I understand the complete picture of INFJ moral rigidity. So let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Like I said, get the Ecstatic Soul if you haven't yet, and also its sequel, The Infinite Soul, which is my latest book, came out last year. Check the reviews. The first link below is to the book INFJ Life in the Modern World. So the world is often seen as hostile. We're full of people not worth trusting. And yes, I argue in this book that the key to INFJ flourishing, purpose, and meaningfulness of life is to embrace your authentic INFJ identity. How to do it in a way that is most conducive to your joy is all that this book is about. So get the book down below. It goes very well together with the other book. So you could also, treat yourself by getting both books. And as usual, guys, don't forget that the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. There's a link down there. This is my main source of income. My channel depends on your kind donations. If you become a member, you will access what's going to soon be our Discord server. You get access to bonus content every 2 weeks where we go in depth about certain topics. And you get access to me and the others. It's a great time. Hopefully see you there, and to talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.